Crummy Cocoa. Apologize for the bad lighting, it's a really crummy day today. I recently went to the thrift store and found a pair of old sunglasses that I thought could be turned into a pretty neat craft, especially if you have some just laying around that you don't know what to do with. So that's what I'm gonna do. Like always, everything that I'm using today can be found at your local craft stores, and I will leave a link in the description of everything being used in today's video.
So these are the sunglasses that I picked up. They were about $5 and I found them at Goodwill. And though they look fine as is, I thought of a way to make them even better. But before I do so, I'm going to make a few accessories that will be added on later. To do that, I'm starting off with some soft wire and cutting off a few small pieces. I want to make some tiny mushrooms to add to my sunglasses, and these small pieces of wire will make great sturdy stems. To make the mushroom caps, I'm starting off with Premo Sculpy clay. I broke off small pieces of these two different shades of blue and began to mix them together to create another blue. This will help create a variety of colors while still keeping them similar. I began to work the clay to make it more malleable and began shaping it into a mushroom cap shape. I did so by rolling the clay out into a ball and pinching the top to form a cone, then flattening the bottom. I then took a small piece of wire that I cut earlier and pushed it into the clay to give the cap a stem. To finish off the mushroom, I took my metal tool and began imprinting grooves on the bottom of the cone to give it more of a mushroom cap look. I made a few of every color so I could have an extra for another project or in case one breaks. Now that the accessories are done, we can move on to customizing the glasses. To do so, I brought up my Apoxie Sculpt, which is a durable air-dry clay that dries rock solid within 24 hours. I took parts A and B and began to mix them together until the clay was a solid color and consistency. I will note that if you do plan on working with this clay and have sensitive skin, I would recommend wearing latex gloves as it could cause skin irritation. My skin doesn't react to it, hence why I'm not wearing any. You could just start sculpting on the glasses if you'd like, but since I still want to be able to see out of these glasses, I'm going to take an extra precaution. For that, I whipped out some masking tape and began taping up the frames of my glasses. The tape that I'm using is an artist masking tape, which makes it easier to pull off without damaging the piece. After the frames were all taped up, I brought back the Apoxie Sculpt that I mixed up earlier and began applying it to the frames of the glasses. If you plan on doing this though, make sure to avoid the hinges of the glasses so you don't accidentally freeze them in place with the clay, because once the clay is on there, it's extremely difficult to remove. After the frames were covered in a layer of clay, I began to take my metal tool and sculpt indents into the clay to make it look like tree bark. I want these glasses to look like they were made out of wood and then nature took over it over time. And creating long indents in the clay is a very simple yet effective way to imitate wood bark. And to also give it a more natural look, I sculpted some little patches of moss. Then, taking those tiny mushrooms that I sculpted earlier, I attached them to the mossy areas that I sculpted onto the glasses. I did this while the clay was still malleable, so the glasses could all dry as a solid piece. After 24 hours, the clay was rock solid and can finally be painted on. Using my Liquitex acrylic paint in burnt sienna and burnt umber, I poured some onto a paper plate and began painting the frames of my glasses. I used a combination of these two colors to give more variety to my glasses, similar to the mushrooms. After that, I went in with a pearlescent green and began to paint the moths that I sculpted. I then used my white Posca pen to paint the grooves and stem of the mushroom caps. You can simply use white acrylic paint for this, but I just used my Posca to have more precision. After the glasses were painted, I brought up my Liquitex matte varnish and coated it with a thin layer, which I then let dry for a couple of hours. After the glasses were nice and dry, I proceeded to peel off tape to reveal the frames of the glasses. This was a slow process, but with some time and patience, I managed to peel the tape off. I think this craft came out looking pretty cool for it being quite a simple process. And of course, I tried them on to see what they would look like. As always, the techniques that I've shown you today can be applied to all sorts of crafts and sculpting. And if you use any of the techniques that I've shown you today in your creations, feel free to tell me on Instagram or Pinterest at Coco's Angels Dolls. I hope you enjoyed today's adventure, and I'll see you next Friday. Bye!